Okay, AP, I am trying my best to stay ahead since you should know by now that I had to take a few personal days, but I still wanted to make sure you guys got everything. So the recorded lectures will proceed as scheduled. Um, I just have to keep it straight in my head what day I'm recording for, but I'm going to have that there for you. The only thing you should miss out on is one live session. Uh, to that end, I'm hoping there's two videos posted today. This one, and then I hope that while I'm in Nashville, I'll be able to record a video that goes over your exams and essays. If I haven't done that, check progress book. Hopefully I have the grades in. It is absolutely in my plan and in my schedule to grade your essays, to grade your tests, have them posted, and have a video to review the basic results like we would always do today. But technology I don't know if my kid's apartment will have internet by then. I don't know if I can find an internet cafe that isn't COVID-y. So I promise, I will do my best. If it's not there, obviously we'll cover it when we get back. And maybe if I have enough sketchy internet, I can at least get it into Progress Book. But I can almost guarantee you it's going to be graded by the time you see this. So just wanted you to know the plan. If there's a second video, you already know the answer. Okay, this next unit that you're getting ready for, Unit 4. This is going to be a tough test. So you're going to probably want to take some more notes than you normally do. As a matter of fact, I'm going to offer for one tough section notes that I took because there was another time, probably moving this kid to college originally, that I had to take off. And I took notes for the kids because it was such a tough section. I'll share those with you. It's going to be a little bit tougher. I want you to be mentally prepared for that. The terms that should show up, the study guides that we call them, are just study guides for this unit. Terms are only going to be an essay one time per 9 weeks, and that already happened. So the study guide that has the names and the people, that is just a reference for you. You don't have to do anything with it. You may be wise to do something with it. In particular, if you're, and I don't know at the time of this recording, if your test scores you thought were a little bit stronger, if you thought you went through that test a little bit easier, it probably has something to do with the fact that you sat down and wrote the terms for 30 people and places. So it may be a good study strategy for you, but I understand you don't always have time to do that. So the essay assigned for this particular unit, I'm going over the rubric now. I didn't realize we don't have school coming up Friday, October 9th. Again, I'm in many worlds here time-wise. But because we don't have school Friday, October 9th, that means your essay will be due Wednesday, October 14th. So we've got a decent chunk of time to work on that. So let's go over that rubric, and then we have a few pages to go over today. And then we're keeping pace with what I did in AP when we were live and regular, regular school. And we may be in a more traditional school format soon. We'll roll with it either way. But actually for you guys, between having 2 live sessions most weeks, one this week, and having, if we don't have school Friday, we might not meet live at all. Oh no. But with our live sessions and 5 recordings, we've been able to keep up. So essays. So this is a little bit different, and it's going to be even more different in the online format. So the intro, which I'm sure you could read, but I'll still read. Pamphlets and newspapers became a crucial ingredient to winning the hearts and minds of the American colonials. To demonstrate an understanding of the material from different viewpoints, you were to write a letter to the editor of the Boston Gazette and Country Journal as either a loyalist or a patriot. You're not to write both letters. You're to write one or the other. Do not write both. If you do, I'll only grade one. Okay, just write one. It must be addressed to the Boston Gazette. Now, I don't care which one you write. I don't think one's particularly easier than the other, but it will take the format of a letter. And I'll tell you right now in the rubric, one of the points is really peculiar. One of the points is for creativity. There is no need for an outside resource in this particular case. Most regular essays, you would. I keep hitting you with new forms of essays. So this is something you would not honestly see on the AP exam, but I've been told by my students in the past that this actually was pretty helpful for them to understand. So you will not have an outside resource for this. You will be given 1 point on the 9-point scale, and I'll admit it's very subjective, for creativity. How can you express creativity? Well, since it is a letter, When you were physically handing them in person, people did things like soak them in tea, burn the edges, that sort of thing safely. We're not going to be able to do that. So in the online format, your creativity will be shown through smaller things like maybe you use a script font. Make sure though, if you're going to do a script font, make it like ridiculously big, like 16 point, just because that script gets very hard to read. If you do that at that 12 point, almost impossible to read. How you address things, how the wording and language you use. If you can throw in a few ye olds, it may sound a little bit more authentic. So I'll be judging creativity by that and how you describe your situations. So that's one of the 9 points, creativity. Even your name. You don't have to sign your name because you're turning it in through Google Classroom. Your name will be affiliated with the essay, so you can come up with, that could be part of your creativity, coming up with some goofy name. Pat Riot, Patriot, is a very common name. Whatever you want to do with that. Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 rubrics. One for the Loyalist letter, one for the Patriot letter. You do one or the other. In both cases, there's 1 point for creativity. So we're looking for 8 more points. In your Loyalist letter, you are going to explain the Stamp Act. Now, by the way, if you're directly quoting from Bailey, this isn't a regular essay, but I do want you to cite if you're using any direct quotes. So you have to be creative. You have to say something like, my Uncle Bailey told me, my neighbor Bailey told me, okay? It's a little cheesy, but it makes me feel better about your academic consistencies. So 1 point for explaining the Stamp Act, sort of in a very colloquial, casual way, as you would as a loyalist. You're explaining the details of the Stamp Act, that's 1 point. You then get 1 point for defending why this is good or necessary. You're basically saying, as a loyalist, you like the Stamp Act, or you at least understand why it's there, and you get 1 point for properly defending it and saying why it's good or necessary. You get 1 point for countering 2 of the typical arguments that the Patriots would have. See, we'll get to that point in the lecture, but you'll have to take some of these things that the Patriots would say and just, you're going to have to destroy them from that sort of British or loyalist perspective. In particular, you must also destroy no taxation without representation. So really, you're destroying 3 of their points for 2 points in the rubric, if that makes sense. So you have to counter sort of 2 of the smaller arguments. That's why that's only worth 1 point. And you must counter no taxation without representation. That's 1 full point. You then, for 1 point, must tell me how you have directly benefited from the tax or what a minimal impact it has been on your life. So if you describe something that would typically be taxed, you can either say, oh, it helped me because of this, or, and it has to be specific to your made up world, or you could tell me, oh, it was this small. It was no big deal. You must defend virtual representation. You'll learn about that. And then very importantly, for 2 points, defending virtual representation is 1 point. For 2 points, give both versions of the Boston Massacre and then tell me which one you believe. There's a loyalist version, and there's a patriot version. As a loyalist, you better say you agree with sort of the loyalist version. So you will get that in lecture as well. That might be in tomorrow's lecture. You will destroy one version and you will say, this is what I really believe happened, but you will tell both versions. And then, as I said, creativity. So real quick, a recap, 1 point for the Stamp Act, 1 point for defending why this tax is good and necessary, 1 point for countering 2 of the smaller arguments about why we should have, or against, the Patriot arguments about why we shouldn't have this tax. 1 full point for destroying no taxation without representation. That is a really big argument, so we need more focus on that. How you have either benefited, 1 point for how you've either benefited from or had a very small impact on your life from this tax. So basically, it's no big deal is what you're saying. 1 point for defending virtual representation. 2 points for describing both versions of the Boston Massacre and saying which version you agree with. And 1 point for creativity. Okay. I know that seems like a lot, but it falls together pretty simply. And if you get confused, rewind this little part. If you're going to do the Patriot letter, okay? Same point for creativity. You get 1 point for explaining the Stamp Act. That could be generic in both. Either one of these should sound pretty much the same at that point. Remember, you're only writing one, but that part will sound the same no matter which side of this you're going to be on. You then have to give me 3 reasons why this Stamp Act is entirely unfair. 3 reasons why, and that's worth 3 points. So it's a little bit different. In the British letter, you only got 2 points for basically countering these. You're going to get 3 points for explaining these because it's going to be a little bit more detail. And one of them must be why no taxation without representation is unfair. And you have to get a little specific about why it's fair. Remember, when writing for history, you want to cite any or use any specifics you can. I'll leave it at that. I want then for 1 point, a specific example of how this tax has hurt you. So it's just the opposite of the Loyalist letter. You are in this pretend world are going to say, this is how this tax hurt me personally, okay? You are then going to destroy virtual representation, the British argument of virtual representation. You're going to destroy it. You're then going to give both versions of the Boston Massacre and tell me which version you believe in. Again, very similar to the Loyalist letter, although you better be agreeing with a different version. Then you get that 1 point for creativity. So I don't know which one's easier. Doesn't matter to me, but there's no wishy-washiness in this letter. You are full-bore patriot or full-bore loyalist in this letter. You personally may see nuances from both sides. It's great. I don't care. You're writing a letter pretending to have the perspective wholly and completely on one side or the other. So a quick recap on that. Patriot letter, 1 point for the Stamp Act, explanation sort of in the intro of your letter. There doesn't have to be a proper thesis, by the way. It's a letter, that's fine. 3 points for explaining 3 specific reasons why the Stamp Act is unfair. One of those must be explaining why no taxation without representation is insane. 1 point for a specific example of how it has hurt you. 1 point for destroying the virtual representation argument. And 2 points for giving both versions of the Boston Massacre and telling me which version you believe. And then 1 point for creativity. Okay? So that's, remember, just do one of those, not both. Do one of those letters. I don't think one is easier than the other. So we're going to start this unit. Whenever we start a unit, we don't really usually have a full lecture. We usually have 15 or 20 minutes of lecture because we would normally be reviewing the test and essay. So I'm not going to hit you with as long of a video today because hopefully there's going to be a 15 or 20-minute video reviewing your test and essays. So let's talk about the road to revolution, the start of chapter 7, the start of unit 4. A few chapters ago, I told you that a lot of times you can look at the big picture, macro, and the small picture, micro. And it's amazing how many times you can draw these sort of correlations. And I'm going to give you another one today. The American Revolution, Bailey argues, is really something that had been building for a long time. It just doesn't happen. His exact quote, insurrection of thought almost always precedes insurrection of deed. If I'm walking around the classroom when we're back in the physical classroom, and I'm walking around the room and I pick on, I don't know, who am I going to pick on today? I pick on Easton, and I say something rude to Easton. And all of a sudden, Easton gets up and cusses me out. By the way, of course, Easton wouldn't do this. Okay. But he cusses me out and yells at me and screams at me and walks out the door. It's probably not because of what I just said at that moment. That's probably the straw that broke the camel's back. Maybe I'd said this thing and that thing and this other thing to Easton, and maybe I'd been writing mean things on his essay feedback, and I've been saying all this stuff, building, it's building, and it's building. It's not like all of a sudden one day Easton said, I hate Penrose. He'd been hating me for a long time, and I just found out at that moment. So that sort of explains the American Revolution. Bailey makes the argument the revolution is not the same as the war. The revolution had been going on in our minds for like a decade, 2 decades, maybe even longer. The war just happens to break out in the 1770s. In addition, another truism, part of the problem the British have is that distance weakens authority, Bailey quote, great distance weakens it greatly. Micro and macro again. I'm a parent. I have an 18-year-old and a 22-year-old. As you get older, and this will happen obviously to you too, when you're living in the same house, you got a fair amount of control. And you should, because they're younger. When you first go off to college, if that's your path, that's the first step to you as a parent sort of losing a little bit of control. I could say I'm thinking my youngest at the moment, because he was a high school senior this year and he's a college freshman this year. You know, we had one thing we're kind of strict on is curfew. So we had a strict curfew. I have no idea when he's getting home right now. I just don't. But to his dorm room, I mean, I don't know. And that's life. Hopefully it works out okay, but I mean, I can't control that. Mrs. B wants to get Life 360 on him, and I'm like, hey, you know, he's in college. It is what it is. He's just at UT. We could drop in on him. We've always announced our visit so far, but our other kid went to OU. That was 4.5 hours away. Could drop in on him, but it's harder. One of you might, I don't know, go to school like in Oregon or UCLA or something like that. No parent drop-ins on that one. No surprise visits there. You're going to lose some of that control. In parenting, you're supposed to. They're supposed to grow up and evolve and become their own people. In this case, colonies were not supposed to become their own nation, but we are clearly doing that because this 3,000-mile gap between our nation, between the colonies and their nation, is making it so they have very little authority, and they didn't realize how much we realized it and how little they did. That we just don't listen to what they say, and we just have been doing it since Andros had just been ignoring, and really before Andros, ignoring what they say. And so this is going to be a big problem because they discovered this in the French and Indian War, and they're not happy about it. They are operating under this mercantile theory. And the mercantile theory has a couple aspects to it, but one is wealth equals power. That's another one you can micro and macro too. Rich individuals have more power than people who aren't rich. It's just, I mean, as a not rich person, I mean, I'm not bragging because it isn't me. I'm just saying that's just sort of a truism. You know, your ability to afford maybe the best lawyer, your ability, just to keep it simple. You go out to dinner, I go out to dinner. Restaurant's full. I can tip the guy $50, you can't. Am I getting that table, the one table that opens up, or are you? I think I got a better chance. Now, I'm not one, I've never tipped $50 in my life, but if there's a rich guy there who says, I'll give you $500 for that table, I'm not getting that table either. So wealth equals power. Well, does that work out for nations? Absolutely. Wealthy nations can afford larger militaries, for example. Wealth is going to equal power. So the British believe bullion, gold and silver, just another word for that. Wealth, bullion equals power. And the purpose of the colonies is to enrich the country and make them more powerful, if that all sort of tracks. So the American colonies aren't here to provide for religious independence and freedom and good lives for the people there. That's a nice byproduct if it happens to work out, but that's not the purpose of the colonies. The purpose of the colonies from their perspective is to make England richer, hence more powerful. And when Americans start to realize that perhaps what's in the best interest of the British by making them more money and more powerful is not necessarily in the best interest of the individuals of what becomes the United States, you start to see this split. So let's talk about how mercantilism plays out in the average American life, and then we'll wind it up. Everything that came to the New World had to be landed in Great Britain first. So if we were going to buy something from France, and the English even let us because they could prevent us from doing it, but maybe it's something only the French make, it had to land in England first and be taxed, and then that price would be passed along to us. That certainly doesn't help us out. Things that we grew, in particular tobacco, but there were other things. Things that we grew had to go to England only. We couldn't sell our tobacco to France. Now, what gets tricky is sometimes France is willing to pay more money. And that really makes us mad when we have the notion of, oh my gosh, France will pay us this much more for this product, but we're not even allowed to sell it to them. what we tend to leave out is that sometimes England is guaranteeing us more money above market value, way more than, say, France would pay that particular month or year. But we ignore that because we tend to just focus on what makes us mad, where we feel we're restricted. We're not allowed to produce many things. We're not allowed to produce some basic industrial things because we can't provide any competition for the businesses in England. We have no banks in the colonies. All of our money is being sort of sucked out. There's no real money coming in. It's just bizarre that we don't have a single bank in the United States, in what would become the United States. We're going to talk a little bit about legislation. We'll focus more on that tomorrow. But the Privy Council, we could pass legislation. We had a certain amount of freedom and independence in passing legislation, but the Privy Council, the King's Council, could veto it if they wanted. Now, they only did it 5 to 6% of the time. That's huge. I'm going to tell you a boring truth. I mean, I know I was only on city council, but in city council, I talked to representatives who said it's pretty much the same thing in the state and national level. 95% of what you pass is kind of no-brainer stuff. 95% of the stuff you pass is like, oh, this road crumbled, this bridge fell apart. Can we fix it? Yes. Here, fix it. Here, pass the legislation to do it. 5 or 6% of the stuff is really what you're getting elected for. The really hard issues where you have to do research and really make a decision and come down on a side. So to only veto 5 to 6% of the stuff, and with no way to override it, just the Privy Council could say, no, that law you passed, no, we're done with that. It's actually huge power, because that means anything where a real decision is being made, where you have real judgment, man, you're just taking that away. And that is an absolutely huge deal. Now, again, are there good sides and bad sides to this? Yeah. There are some benefits. The British guaranteed our market. We could sell tobacco at a higher price. We just always had this absolute price set. We actually didn't pay any taxes for the defense that the British provided for us up to that point. Not a penny. The average American was probably financially better off than the average British person, and that's because we were helping their country. Now, again, negatives, and this is sort of menace and merits of mercantilism for the headache. We had to sell our stuff to England. We were forced to do that. There were occasions when it didn't work as well. We were forced to not be able to buy goods from other countries that may have on occasion sold it cheaper. And we have a tendency to focus on the negative and not on the positive in this. And it creates a lot of tension, especially when they're making fun of us. So we're going to talk about how that tension sort of erupts with the stamp tax. That'll be tomorrow. That covers everything for today. If I understand the schedule right, I just realized I won't be speaking with you live, but I'm absolutely keeping up with you in the Gmail. And really, it's only one live session extra that you were missing because I'm gone. And I do apologize for that, but I got to move the kid. And Nashville's not an easy move. All right, everybody, have a great day.